The Running Man, 1987. 20 Weird Facts You Never Knew. The Running Man, 1987, isn't just another Arnold Schwarzenegger action flick, it's a neon-soaked nightmare where TV kills for ratings and one-liners hit harder than bullets. Set in a future that feels alarmingly close, the film predicted reality shows, fake news, and society's hunger for spectacle. But behind the blood and spandex was total chaos. Director swaps, real fights, and wild production secrets Hollywood tried to bury. These are 20 weird facts you never knew about The Running Man, and trust me, the truth is even crazier than the movie. Number 1. The set was an abandoned steel mill. The dazzling game arena of The Running Man wasn't built on a fancy Hollywood lot, it was shot inside a decrepit steel mill that had been abandoned for years. When the crew first arrived, it looked like a war zone. Rusted beams, broken floors, and toxic residue coating everything. It took 7 months of cleanup and construction to make it safe enough to shoot, but here's the part many do not know. The entire film was shot in just 2 months. The production budget ballooned, but that gritty texture gave the movie its industrial, nightmarish look. Sparks flying, metal groaning, none of it was fake. The space was literally falling apart around them. The irony? The film's story is about a crumbling society built on illusion, and it was filmed inside one. Sometimes the best dystopias don't need special effects, they just need real decay and a camera. Arnold Schwarzenegger didn't just play Ben Richards, he practically rewrote him through sarcasm and one-liners. Every kill in The Running Man came with a verbal punch harder than the physical one. Here is Sub-Zero. Now, Plane Zero was so ridiculous it became iconic. Writers later admitted they held informal contests to see who could create the dumbest, funniest line possible, and Arnold loved every one of them. He delivered them dead serious, which made them even funnier. Fans still quote them decades later. Proof that irony ages better than muscle. Critics mocked the dialogue, but audiences knew exactly what it was, a joke on the genre itself. But the story doesn't end there. In Fact 11, you'll discover how the filmmakers continued celebrating Arnold's iconic roles, turning the movie into a meta-action playground packed with self-referential nostalgia. The film's opening feels grimy, oppressive, and disturbingly real, because it was. The Running Man filmed its early prison scenes inside a real California correctional facility. The production actually used genuine inmates as background extras, adding a sense of raw authenticity money couldn't fake. Cast and crew had to follow strict security rules, no direct interaction, no unnecessary movement, and absolutely no reshoots once the doors locked. That tension leaked into the performances, especially Arnold's, who reportedly stayed quiet between takes to keep the mood. The extras weren't trained actors, they were men living the nightmare the movie pretended to show. When you rewatch the opening now, that energy is palpable, the clang of metal, the real eyes behind the bars. It's one of those rare Hollywood moments where reality slipped into fiction, and the result was as unsettling as it was unforgettable. Chaos struck before the first frame rolled. The Running Man was originally directed by Andrew Davis, the filmmaker who'd later make The Fugitive. But just 1 week into shooting, he was abruptly fired by the studio. Enter Paul Michael Glaser, better known as Starsky from Starsky and Hutch, who had limited directing experience and almost no prep time. What followed was controlled madness. Glaser shot the entire film in just over 3 months, racing through scenes with barely any rewrites or reshoots. The result? A movie that feels like it's sprinting on adrenaline, uneven, flashy, and chaotic in all the right ways. Critics blamed the film's tone on its behind-the-scenes turmoil, but that's exactly what gave it life. The frantic pacing, the feverish visuals, the sense that everything's one take away from collapse. That's not an accident. That's how it was made. Under pressure, and somehow it worked. Number 5. A sequel was planned but never made. In a world obsessed with sequels, The Running Man somehow dodged one. For years, fans begged for more, and in 2014, Arnold Schwarzenegger himself teased that a second part might actually happen. Studios even discussed modernizing the game show concept for a 21st century dystopia filled with drones, influencers, and streaming bloodsport. But like most Hollywood promises, it fizzled into vapor. No script, no shoot, no sequel. The irony? The movie that predicted reality TV couldn't survive Hollywood reality. In 2020, rumors resurfaced again, this time with Edgar Wright reportedly circling a faithful adaptation of Stephen King's original novel. But so far, silence. Maybe it's better this way. The world already feels too close to The Running Man as it is. Another sequel might look less like science fiction and more like a documentary we're all trapped inside. But the story doesn't end there. In Fact 14, you'll see how despite all this, the movie still struggled to find its audience in 1987, a box office underdog with a cult legacy waiting to explode. Number 6, it was based on a Stephen King novel. Not everyone knows The Running Man began as a book, and not just any book. It was written by Stephen King, though under his secret pseudonym, Richard Bachman. King used that name to publish darker, more cynical stories, without the pressure of his horror fame. But here's the twist. His original Running Man wasn't a flashy action tale. It was a grim, hopeless story about poverty, surveillance, and a man hunted for sport on live TV. King called it a dark novel, meant to disturb, not entertain. When Hollywood adapted it, they turned despair into spectacle, pain into punchlines. Even King admitted the movie missed the tone, but nailed the entertainment. And yet somehow, both versions tell the same truth. A world where entertainment devours humanity. Only one does it with bullets and neon. Long before The Running Man hit theaters, Japan already had a show that blurred the line between fun and torture. It was called Trans-American Ultra Quiz, a 1980s TV spectacle where contestants endured real pain, humiliation, and endurance challenges on live broadcast. All for cash and fame. Stephen King saw clips of it and thought, what if the stakes were life and death? That spark became The Running Man. What's wild is how prophetic it was. Decades later, reality shows like Fear Factor and Squid Game echoed the same concept. People suffering for entertainment. King turned a goofy Japanese game show into a mirror reflecting society's obsession with watching others break. The scariest part? He didn't exaggerate much. The world just caught up. And now, when you watch The Running Man, it doesn't feel futuristic anymore. It feels like TV. Number 8. Arnold wasn't the first choice. Before Arnold Schwarzenegger took over, the role of Ben Richards almost went to Christopher Reeve, Patrick Swayze, or Dolph Lundgren. Imagine Superman or Johnny Castle dodging chainsaws on live TV. But Arnold's casting changed everything, including Stephen King's opinion. King hated it. His Richards wasn't a muscle god. He was a desperate, skinny everyman fighting for his daughter's life. Schwarzenegger, on the other hand, looked like a man who could break the game's show and the network with one arm. King was so unhappy he demanded his name be removed from the credits. That's why the movie credits Richard Bachman instead, King's old pseudonym. Ironically, Arnold's larger-than-life presence made the story less tragic, but infinitely more iconic. In the end, King's quiet rebellion turned into one of the loudest, most explosive dystopian films of the decade, but the story doesn't end there. In Fact 17, you'll see how Arnold took that action persona to another level, performing stunts so intense that few actors could ever compete. Number 9. Arnold's prison sweatshirt was product placement. When Ben Richards escapes prison, he throws on a faded gray sweatshirt with World Gym printed across the chest. At first glance, it's just a costume choice, but look closer, it's Arnold's own brand. In the 1980s, World Gym was partly owned by Schwarzenegger, a spin-off of the legendary Gold's Gym empire that helped define his bodybuilding career. So yes, the shirt wasn't just clothing, it was self-promotion. The world's most famous action star managed to sneak an ad for his own fitness club into a dystopian deathmatch. Brilliant? Absolutely. Shameless? Even better. What's funny is that the movie's theme, media corruption and corporate control, literally plays out on his chest. Arnold's running for his life, dodging killers, wearing a commercial. Only in the 80s could a man flee from fascist TV producers and plug his gym membership at the same time. Number 10. Predator and The Running Man shared the same co-star, and future 1987 was the year Arnold Schwarzenegger owned the box office twice. Predator and The Running Man released within months of each other, and both featured a wild card, Jesse Ventura. Back then, Ventura was a rookie actor and former pro wrestler with a voice like a Harley engine. But what makes this pairing legendary isn't just the movies, it's what happened after. Ventura became the governor of Minnesota, 1999-2003. Schwarzenegger followed suit as governor of California, 2003-2011. Two co-stars from ultra-violent sci-fi thrillers somehow ended up running real American states. It's the most 80s political origin story imaginable. Muscles, explosions, democracy. Fans later joked that The Running Man wasn't fiction at all, it was a campaign ad in disguise. After all, who needs speeches when you can govern with charisma, sunglasses, and a flamethrower named Fireball? If you're loving these insane Running Man secrets, smash that like button and hit subscribe because the most shocking facts are still coming. And don't forget to ring the bell so you don't miss the moment when the deadliest stalkers and behind-the-scenes chaos are finally revealed. Trust me, you haven't seen anything yet. Number 11. The film paid homage to Arnold's greatest hits. Remember that legendary sarcasm and verbal punch back in Fact 2? That same energy runs through the opening scenes of the film. The Running Man wastes no time winking at fans. In its opening scene, Schwarzenegger carries a massive, steel beam on his shoulder, an unmistakable callback to Commando, 1985, where he famously lugged a giant log through the forest. It's like the filmmakers knew audiences wanted that Arnold, the unstoppable, one-man army. And the nods didn't stop there. Later, just before the deadly game begins, he looks the host dead in the eye and says, "I'll be back." The crowd roars because it's the Terminator's most iconic line. These inside jokes turned The Running Man into a meta-action spectacle, a movie aware of its own myth-making. Every reference was both parody and celebration, a wink to the audience that said, "Yeah, we know why you're here." The dystopian future might be bleak, but the nostalgia, pure gold-plated 80s glory. Number 12. The producer didn't know he was buying a Stephen King story. When producer Rob Cohen bought the film rights to The Running Man, he thought he was adapting a gritty sci-fi novel by a little-known author named Richard Bachman. What he didn't know was that Bachman was actually Stephen King. King used the pseudonym to publish darker, more cynical stories that didn't fit his horror brand. Cohen only discovered the truth after securing the rights, realizing he had just bought a Stephen King property for a fraction of its real value. Talk about a Hollywood plot twist. By then, King's identity had been exposed publicly, making The Running Man one of the last Bachman books to hit the screen. Cohen later laughed about it, calling it the best accidental deal of his career. In a way, that confusion fits perfectly. A movie about deception born from an author who was literally hiding in... Number 13. The ending was changed. Stephen King's original Running Man novel didn't end with fireworks and fanfare, it ended with fire and tragedy. In the book, Ben Richards hijacks a plane and crashes it into the Game Network's skyscraper in a desperate act of rebellion. But when Hollywood got hold of the story, tragedy wasn't part of the brand. The studio wanted their superstar alive, victorious and flexing, so they rewrote everything. Instead of a doomed anti-hero, Schwarzenegger's Richards becomes a full-blown 80s action god, blowing up the villain and walking into the spotlight like a rock star. It's a drastic change, one that completely flips King's bleak vision into a testosterone-fueled fairy tale. Yet ironically, that happy ending helped turn The Running Man into a cult hit, proving once again that in Hollywood death rarely tests well, especially when your lead's name is Arnold. Number 14. The film struggled at the box office. Remember the elusive sequel teased back in Fact 5? That same anticipation highlights the irony of The Running Man's original release. For a movie packed with explosions, one-liners, and Arnold Schwarzenegger in peak form, The Running Man didn't explode where it mattered, the box office. Despite critics calling it Arnold's best film since The Terminator, audiences in 1987 didn't quite bite. With a $27 million budget, it scraped in only $38 million domestically. Overseas, it performed better, but nowhere near the cultural juggernaut of Predator or Commando. Ironically, the movie about television ratings became a victim of its own, low audience numbers. Still, it refused to die. VHS rentals, cable marathons, and cult fans resurrected it into a late-night favorite. By the 2000s, The Running Man had transformed from box office underdog to pop culture prophecy. Its vision of bloodthirsty audiences glued to screens. That part aged disturbingly well. The profits came later, not in dollars, but in relevance. Number 15. It inspired the TV show Gladiators. If The Running Man looked like a brutal game show, that's because it became one. The film directly inspired the hit TV competition Gladiators, which launched in the late 80s and took the world by storm. The concept was simple. Ordinary contestants battling elite athletes in oversized arenas, with cheering crowds and over-the-top commentary. Sound familiar? Producers admitted they borrowed the idea straight from The Running Man, just with fewer chainsaws and explosions. The show became a global sensation, spawning versions in the US, UK, Australia, and even Russia. In fact, It was gladiators that made Vladimir Turchinsky, a Russian strongman, a household name. The irony? What started as a satire about entertainment turning violent became the blueprint for one of television's most beloved family shows. The Running Man was supposed to warn us, instead, it gave us primetime fun. Number 16, the actor who played Dynamo died before the premiere. Behind the neon suit and opera singing, Erland van Lith brought the character Dynamo to life, the electrified villain who fought Ben Richards with both voltage and vibrato. But tragedy struck before audiences ever saw his performance. Just 2 months before the movie's release, Erland died suddenly at the age of 34. A former MIT graduate and professional wrestler, he was known for his immense talent and gentle personality off-camera. His death added a haunting layer to The Running Man, especially during Dynamo's final moments on screen. The irony is brutal. The film mocks death as spectacle, yet one of its stars didn't live to see its debut. In a movie obsessed with life-or-death ratings, Erland's loss turned fiction into something painfully real. Number 17, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Did many of his own stunts. Remember Arnold's transformation from skinny everyman to a colossus back in Fact 8. That same intensity bled into the action itself. Arnold Schwarzenegger wasn't just playing a tough guy, he was one. Known for pushing his body to extremes, Schwarzenegger performed many of his own stunts in The Running Man. From explosive fight scenes to sprinting through fire and debris, he refused to let a stunt double steal his thunder. Arnold's commitment gave the movie a raw, physical edge that few action stars could match. According to crew members, he even insisted on doing dangerous takes multiple times to get it right. That relentless drive paid off. His performance feels authentic, desperate, and human, despite the film's over-the-top sci-fi premise. It's the kind of intensity that made him a legend. Number 18. The Running Man was banned in some countries. Believe it or not, The Running Man was considered too controversial for some audiences. The film's mix of televised killings, totalitarian control, and government propaganda hit too close to home for certain countries in the late 80s. As a result, it faced censorship and even outright bans in parts of Europe and Asia. Critics argued that its graphic violence and political undertones made it dangerous. Ironic, since the movie itself criticizes those very systems of control. Over time, the bans only made the film more notorious. What was once seen as shocking fiction now feels like a warning that aged a little too well. Number 19. The Running Man featured impressive visual effects for its time. For a movie made in 1987, The Running Man looks surprisingly futuristic. Instead of relying on early CGI, the filmmakers used a mix of miniatures, matte paintings, and practical effects to build their dystopian world. The aerial cityscapes were handcrafted models, detailed right down to the smog. Explosions were done on set, not in post. Even the glowing armor of the stalkers used real-light rigs, giving them an eerie realism. It's the kind of visual craftsmanship modern blockbusters often fake with pixels. That tactile texture, the grime, the sparks, the sweat, makes the movie's world feel lived in, not imagined. Number 20. The film's take on corrupt media feels uncomfortably real. Today, what makes The Running Man timeless isn't just its action, it's its message. The film's ruthless game show, where murder is turned into primetime entertainment, feels disturbingly close to modern reality television. The way media manipulates truth, edits footage, and controls public perception mirrors the clickbait-driven world we live in now. Richard Dawson's performance as Damon Killian, the smirking host who sells lies for ratings, remains one of cinema's sharpest satires of TV culture. Back in 1987, it was sci-fi. Today, it feels like prophecy. When The Running Man first hit theaters, it looked like wild sci-fi. Game shows turned lethal, media built on blood, but nearly 4 decades later, it feels less like fantasy and more like a dare. The movie predicted influencer culture, viral outrage, and entertainment so addictive we forget what's real. Schwarzenegger may have walked off that set covered in sweat and fire, but the real show never stopped. It just changed platforms. Maybe that's why The Running Man still hits so hard. It's not just an 80s action movie. It's a mirror, flashing neon and static, asking the same question it did in 1987. How much are we willing to watch before we become part of the game?